It's time once again for the only podcast broadcast exclusively on AM Radio, Best Conspiracy Documentaries Podcast. Today's episode, Islam versus Christianity. Why can't we be friends? 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 With your hosts, Dr. Mr. X and Dr. Schroeder, the man with the plan. And then there's me, I'm the lowly old announcer guy. And now, here's the show. Steven, what have you been seeing here in this Decepticon world this week?
Well, this week it's, I don't know, pretty amazing. What I find interesting is these Islamic attacks. The one that killed the 5 military people. They're still pushing that lone wolf thing. That's one thing that's really rubbing me, because it seems like if they can put it on an individual instead of an ideology, it makes it easier for them, and they can downplay it by saying it's a lone wolf, it's an individual. I mean, because that way you don't have to worry about there being actually a threat such as a pack of wolves.
Right. Wow.
It's just one deranged individual. So they're doing their best not to blame the ideology, but the one undeniable fact that nobody can deny is that every Islamic attack is motivated by this ideology that they find in the Quran.
Say it again, please. Every single Islamic attack is motivated by something that they read in the Quran. Is that right?
Absolutely. And see, they always try to say, well, when did he become radicalized? As if he goes to a certain place and he gets this information and all of a sudden he's like a light switch that's turned on. You know, like, does he go, first they blame him going to another country, or they blame, Facebook postings, or they blame, well, they didn't feel like they was accepted by Americans. They didn't feel wanted or appreciated. And then Obama will say, well, we need to offer more job opportunities. And I even had a guy today talk about, well, it's going to continue to happen as long as America invades Islamic countries and kills Islamists with drones, as if the reason they're terrorists is because of our foreign policy or what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And that's not true. We could send them roses, we give them job opportunities, we give them hugs every day, and they would still want to implement Islamic law globally, and they would want to eradicate Christianity because that's what the Quran demands. So it doesn't matter what we do. It's not our fault. It's not the internet's fault. It's not opportunities or poverty's fault. They always find some reason to justify why they act the way they act instead of condemning the motivation behind why they do what they do, which is the Quran.
Now, do you know which part of the Quran, says that or whatever? And I've read it before. Is it the part that talks about cutting off the heads of anyone who believes God had a son?
Well, I went through the Quran. I've been doing this since Ronald Reagan was in office, so I went through the Quran and got all the verses of why the saints can never be reconciled to Islamic law, and made a YouTube video of it. It's entitled that, Why the Saints Can Never Be Reconciled to Islam. And
it'll give right now.
It doesn't have any sound, doesn't have any talking or any music or anything. It's just the quotes from the Quran that state exactly the mindset of these terrorists and why they do what they do. But if you want to look up something, the 1988 verse of the Quran, it's pretty much the echo of their creed, that God begets not. The creed of Islam is Allah the one, Allah alone. He begets not, nor is begotten. There is none like unto him. Okay?
Right.
So, and...
Okay, he begets not. So that just the foundation of Islam, just straight up, one of the main tenets is God cannot, will not, does not, will never have a son.
Right. Now, I had a lengthy conversation with a Muslim today on Facebook, and he was saying, please don't say that, when I was telling him that, the greatest insult to Islam is to say that God begat a son. So I can't even declare the foundation of my faith without being guilty of an unforgivable sin that they could punish me by death with.
That's
and I said, so why is it that I can't say that God begat a son, but Allah beget 3 daughters.
Oh, really? So God didn't have one son, according to the Quran. God had 3 daughters.
Well, see, here's what the deal
That's
is.
allowed.
Before Muhammad came along, Muhammad came like 600 some years after Christ. Before Muhammad, Allah was already in existence. He was the God of all the tribes. He was the supreme pagan deity of pre-Islamic Arabia, and he was the one who was like the God of all things. And he had 3 daughters, and you always hear of the 3 daughters of Allah, also known as the three fates or the triple goddess. Um, or the goddess of the crossroads, even. So the thing is, Muhammad adopted the name Allah to try to unite all the tribes, much like the Catholic Church adopted a lot of the paganistic trappings in order to include the pagans and Christians and bring them together. And that's what Muhammad did by incorporating the name Allah. Now, a lot of people will tell you, well, Allah is just an Arabic word for God, which is not true because the Quran specifically says there is no God but Allah. If there was no Arabic word for God, it'd say there is no Allah but Allah.
Right.
So it proves that Allah is a proper name. People don't understand there's a difference between titles and proper names. Titles like King, Christ, Lord, Judge, those are titles. So is the name God. God isn't a name. God is a title. So we got to get to knowing that Allah is not just another name for God. Allah is a specific proper name given to a very pagan deity. And
Wow.
they adopted that. So that's where the big confusion is as far as people thinking that Allah is the same God as the God of the Bible, because it's definitely not.
Yeah, I'm watching this video that you have right now. One religion calls for physical violence for conversion, while the other simply calls for its separation from such. Now, here's something that I would hear in my head. Like, a lot of non-Christians say that, oh, will say that, oh, your Bible, calls for violence and this, that, and the other. What would you say to that? Like, how do you, defend that? Because it does, and I'm at a
Well,
loss as well.
if people are, when people talk about that, they're usually speaking of the Old Testament
Right.
before the time of Christ, when they was under Levitical law. And a lot of people will talk about Levitical laws and how they're kind of in the same kind of category as some of the Islamic laws. It's like Islam.
Okay. Oh, wow.
The only law that they really abide by, as far as the old Levitical law, is the second commandment about making graven images. See, because that justifies them to pretty much destroy everything. And it's like, yeah, we're obeying the God's law. And it's hard for me to be, empathetic to see some of these statues and graven images of these pagan gods being destroyed. And it seems like the media is more upset about ISIS destroying, statues more than actually committing genocide against Christians. But
Right. Yeah.
so so yeah, they use that to make it seem like they're really religious, and gives them a justification to destroy anything that insults them. And you're sort of seeing that happen here in America now with the Confederate flag and monuments and this, that, and the other, and like the Confederate monument on the stone wall. It looks sort of like Mount Rushmore. They're wanting that taken down, and talking about digging up people and this, that, and the other. And it's just sort of like them trying to implement the ISIS ideology here, that they can ban or destroy anything that insults them. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in the black community that would like to get rid of any kind of reminder that they were slaves at one time. Because I'm sure that's not very flattering. This,
Well,
that,
the
and the other.
whites, the whites don't like it either. It's embarrassing.
Well, yeah, I have no love for this stuff, but as far as trying to go back and eradicate everything that talks about the history of exactly where we were and where we came from and exactly what happened. I mean, that's, you sort of get into the ISIS ideology of eradicating every single thing that
Mm.
is not flattering to your own agenda. And I mean, it would be different if they was like, well, we want to get rid of any kind of memory of, slavery, this, that, and the other. And if they really wanted equality, that would be nice. But it's not about equality. It's the whole push is from the black supremacists and black supremacy. Believe it or
Right.
not, it's one of those things to where I'm all down. Believe me, I'm all down with equality, and that's what I like. But it's difficult when you are considered substandard, and there's such things like affirmative action and things like that, where blacks get preference in contracts and education and in housing and financial aid and this, that, and the other. And they're the ones complaining about inequality. Now, it'd be one thing if they got it and we didn't get it. It's sort of like, okay, well, that's to make up for, the past history. But I mean, me as a German Cherokee, it's kind of difficult knowing that my people were eradicated. Okay. And now I've got to deal with people looking at me as if I'm guilty of keeping them as slaves or even part of slavery when that has nothing to do with me.
You're talking about your share like Indian heritage, right?
Right.
Your
Yeah.
American Indian heritage. Yeah, they wiped. Yeah, the white man wiped them off the continent. So yeah,
So yeah, it's and people look at it like, well, slavery was current and the Indian stuff was way before that. No, the Indian and the slavery things happened at the same time. I mean, why Abraham Lincoln was freeing the slaves, he was sending out troops to Sand Creek and massacring in large scale genocide of the red man. So it's not like there's that big of a history gap between the two. It's the same thing. It's just injustice for me to be looked upon as a descendant of a slaveholder when it's like I've got my own grievance that nobody really cares about, but yet somehow I'm guilty of your grievance, and it's just not justice is what it is. And when you give favoritism, the biggest problem with affirmative action is because when you give one race preferential status, it breeds contempt, number one, but number two, it gives the preferred status a sense of entitlement to where they feel like they are superior because in fact they are being treated superior. So then they got that superiorist, that supremacist mindset to where they feel entitled and that we are not equal to them and we don't deserve the same thing as them and somehow we're guilty of some kind of crime against humanity.
right. Here's what I think about the reparations. It would be just to get it, just so they would shut up about it. Just give it to them, whatever it is. But it's never going to be enough. And this is only for the people that are, greedy and take stuff from whoever's going to hand it out to them. It's not just black people. There's white people. There's American Indians. I'm sure there's all types of people sucking off the government. But if you gave it to them, maybe they would shut up about it. And it would be. But yeah, it would be.
Well, see, that's the flawed thinking that got us in this mess in the first place. Because I mean, that's what they voted for Obama twice with that same mindset, and I guarantee you that's what they was thinking. If we just had a black president and black attorney general and everybody, it's just like the city that's completely black and has these race riots or whatnot, and saying those 6 cops killed a black guy when it was actually 3 white cops and 3 black cops. But of course, initially they only showed the white cops handling the black guy, so they get it all started. But here's a city that is a minority majority. The minority actually rules, but yet the whites are still getting blamed for inequality and injustice when it's like, no, it's your liberal democratic views and policies and procedures that keeps people down in poverty so they have justification for their agenda.
It's crazy. That's why I don't even watch that stuff. It's just I'm not. I don't even keep up on the lies anymore. I pay attention to certain things, but I didn't even know about those riots until they were almost over, and then everybody blows it out of proportion. Oh man, oh man, oh, and I mean nothing really happened. I'm talking about the Ferguson riots. I mean, someone died. Is that right? And that's why the whole thing.
Well, there's a lot of things that happen that set precedent and cause things to continue. Sort of like people getting away with calling for like inciting riots, people that get up and call for burning the city down, and those things happen, but yet there's no charges filed against anybody who does things that normally you would be in trouble for. It's sort of like soliciting murder.
Well, you're allowed to do that, aren't you? I mean, or say, is that free speech or is that over the line? It's trying to solicit people to burn the cities.
Yeah, I'm all about free speech, but there's certain rules that apply. In other words, you got free speech, but you can't extort somebody. You can't extort money from somebody using speech. You can't threaten violence against somebody because of your speech. You can't you can't call for somebody to murder somebody, because all those are actual crimes. And they say, well, free speech, you can't call fire in a crowded theater. Well, that's filing a false report, so that's illegal anyhow. So yeah, there is free speech, but there is also free speech that's considered crimes, and it should be, because I mean it's like Farrakhan. If he says that Malcolm X should be assassinated, and somebody assassinates him,
What?
well, he should be responsible for that because that's not free speech. Free speech doesn't cover crimes.
He said that?
Well, yeah, because see, Malcolm X was supposed to be the one that's in charge of the Nation of Islam. Was supposed to take Elijah Muhammad's place once he died, and so you had a little rift between Malcolm X and Farrakhan. Well, Malcolm X, he had a little change of heart because the Nation of Islam had black supremacy included with it, saying that the white man was the devil and the white man's Bible is poison and all kinds of stuff like that. And then Malcolm went to Mecca and saw that, blacks and Arabs and whites and everybody pretty much could get along, that it wasn't the way Farrakhan was talking about. And that's when the rift began.
Oh, wow.
So once the rift began, Malcolm pretty much was trying to prove his point that they was off base, not true Islam, because the founder, Elijah Muhammad, actually had an affair with some women in his congregation, and he exposed that. And so Malcolm felt justified in putting a fatwa on Malcolm X. So a couple brothers with shotguns took out Malcolm X, and it was about 10, 15 years later, Farrakhan apologized for that, kind of indirectly to the, relatives of Malcolm X. But there was never any consequences for putting a fatwa on.
That is insane. It's totally,
It is insane.
totally insane. So here's a guy, this Farrakhan guy, who says, "Oh, somebody should kill Malcolm X," and then a couple dudes go and do it. I bet you the two dudes that shot him got in trouble. Yes or no?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They got in trouble. But Farrakhan got no trouble at all, and it's because it hides behind this Islamic law, like this fatwa, like we don't want to prosecute fatwas or something.
Well, yeah, because anything that's Islamic law, they can't really. Well, Obama can't even criticize it or even identify it, let alone prosecute it. So yeah, basically, you had the leader of the Nation of Islam getting away with murder, and you could say it was free speech, this, that, and the other. But when you solicit a hit on a person, it's like Al Sharpton's group calling for dead cops in the street. Well, one of the people that was participating in that goes out and kills two cops, and even says it was because he was at the the meetings, this, that, and the other, and he was basically giving what the people was demanding. They was demanding justice, and in their view, justice was dead cops, and so he killed a couple of cops. I mean, yeah, and he got in trouble for it, but did Al Sharpton, did his organization that was actually using their quote-unquote free speech in the street calling for the assassination of cops ever get any consequences? No. And so what does that do? It causes it to continue and get worse and worse.
Right, and I think that's the whole thing. That's why I don't even play into the media's hand, because they're just trying to elicit a reaction from us. It's like they're trying to. It looks like what they're trying to just get us to do something so they can push this martial law on us. What do you think about that?
I have never seen a government try so hard to provoke its citizenry into a civil war.
Okay, there you go. That's a quote. I'm gonna write that down and put it in the blog post. I have never seen a government
try harder to provoke its people into a civil war, and that's what they're doing. It's just sort of like
why do they want that? So they
Huh?
can. Why do they want that? So they can come in and take total control over with martial law, or why would you want to do that?
Well, I know why Obama would want to do that, because number one, it's what's necessary in order to establish this Islamic law is to get it to where it's a race war between blacks and whites. The ones who want a race war in America more than anybody else are the Islamists.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like the Islamists love blacks more than whites. They just know how to destroy America is to cause a race war. I mean, Muhammad himself owned black slaves. Islamic law right now, endorses slavery. So if they're really all about, hating slavery and the whole idea of people having black slaves, well, they're getting seduced by Islam when Islam, its founder, owned more slaves than Washington did.
Really?
So it's just a matter of people not being educated to what the facts are.
Who was Islam's founder?
Muhammad.
Oh, that's just Mohammed. Is that guy? He owned
Yeah,
a bunch of slaves.
He was a camel salesman, and he was out in the desert one night, and he was in a cave, and this angel attacked him and started using violence and terror and choking him, demanding that he recite, and that's what the Quran means, to recite. And the message of the angel was pretty plain and simple: God did not beget a son. So that's why Islamists feel like they're justified in using terror and violence to force people to submit to Islam, is because that's how it got its start in the first place. I mean, Muhammad himself, he thought he was attacked by a demon. They called him jinns, Jinn.
Right.
So his first revelation was that he was attacked by this evil demon, and the only reason he recited what the angel's message was because he felt in his heart that he wasn't going to be able to live unless he recited it. It was his wife that said, "Oh no, that must have been the angel Gabriel." So actually, you could thank Muhammad's first wife for the foundation of Islam, because if Muhammad didn't have her opinion, he would have still been under the same impression that he was attacked by an angry angel, a demon,
A jinn, right?
a jinn. Yeah,
So it's
that's where they get the word
wow.
genie in the bottle.
Right, yeah, genie comes from the word jinn, which is what language is that?
It's Arabic. It's
Arabic.
probably Farsi, I'd say.
It's just insane, man. So the whole religion was twisted around. So it started as this guy gets attacked by an evil spirit, or attacked by some kind of something that forces him, that uses violence, that forces Muhammad to say God did not have a son.
Right.
And so the only reason he said it was because the thing was using violence on him.
That's exactly right, and that's why they use it, and that's why they're justified using it, because that's the way it started.
Why would he continue that religion if it all started that way? Like, you know,
Because, well, after his wife convincing him that it wasn't, an evil spirit, it was the angel, and he must be therefore the messenger to actually introduce this new religion. And it was perfect when you think about, after Rome fell, what filled the vacuum was Christianity with Constantine. So you had Christianity coming, and so the Arabs were pretty much, rejecting all that, and trying to get away from this polytheistic worship of many gods. So then Muhammad came along, and this must be that one monotheistic God, and there is only one God. So the whole foundation of Islam was that he was getting rid of pagan polytheism and adopting this monotheism. But unfortunately, the monotheism he selected had the one supreme God as the original supreme pagan deity of pre-Islamic Arabia. So
that's
yeah, they're
crazy.
monotheistic. They got that part of it right, but they just picked the wrong deity to declare God.
That's just real heavy, man. And then from there, it just goes out into the craziness that is today. You know, extremists. You know, and how much do you believe of that stuff, Stephen? Like those videos you see of ISIS taking people's heads off and whatnot. Is that stuff real?
Oh, it ain't no, it's not anything staged. I mean, it's consistent with the history of the Islamist. I mean, that's the way it was back in the days. I mean, when they was taking over Jewish cities and taking over Christianity. I mean, even American history has record of the Islamists back in the days of the pirates of Tripoli. I mean, the actual song, the anthem of America, talking about from the shores of Montezuma, the Marine song, actually, when you think about it, from the shores of Montezuma, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Tripoli is Libya, and that's where the Islamists, the Barbary Coast, would capture ships, British ships and European ships, and take the Europeans for slaves, and they did brutal things, and all that was documented just as it is today. I mean, they didn't have blasting wire where they could blow heads of 20 of them at a time, but they were known for their. That's where you get the word barbaric, was from the Barbary Coast of the pirates, the Islamists, and that's when they, out of the enlightenment of the founders, made the Treaty of Tripoli, to where they declared that there would never be any kind of discourse between America or Washington and Islam, that there would never be a beef between them and their religion. So basically, if you want to blame why is Obama acting the way he is, he's just complying with probably the only treaty that Washington ever kept, and that was the Treaty of Tripoli, saying they could never, say anything bad about Islam. There will never be any grievance against them, even if the foundation of Islam is totally anti-Christian.
I just don't get it. Like, I mean, how is it not screamingly obvious that this is completely hypocritical to support one side, and but support Islam, what Islam is saying is you can't have your own opinion. You know, why would anybody be brainwashed enough to support something like that? Like, don't get
Well,
it.
it's like Beyonce. It's like Beyonce calling for Sharia law,
Sharia
and
law
she
is
would, she would probably
insane.
be the first one to be killed by Sharia law if it was
Sh-
ever implemented.
She would be.
Well, yeah, her, or dressing the way she does and
Uh,
acting the way she does. I mean,
okay. Now break down some Sharia law, Stephen. What is that? I know homosexuality isn't allowed, right?
well, you don't have any alcohol, tobacco, or firearms, and you don't have any dogs, and women can't be around men when they pray, or it cancels out their prayers. Christians need to be killed, or they must submit to Islam and pay a tax to the Islamists, and then you're still considered a second-class citizen to where they can take your property or whatever you want. I mean, it's just bizarro because here's a real kicker. Okay, for like 200 years, it was against the law for government to use tax dollars to endorse a particular establishment of religion. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's what keeps peace. Because if you look at every conflict in every society in the past, the problem was always that the government was giving preference to one establishment of religion over the other, which causes division and discord and strife and divisions and inevitably hostilities toward them. So the whole purpose of this establishing a new government to where it would be secular and just completely religiously neutral, where
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't get involved with other people's religions and they wouldn't give preference to one religion over another. And that's why we've had peace and prosperity for as long as we have. Then George W. Bush comes along and he has a pen and a phone just like Obama did. And he makes a mandate to where, for the first time in American history, you can start funneling tax dollars to religious organizations. And all the Christians are like, "Woohoo! Yeah, we're on the government dole now. Now we're going to be getting subsidized," as if that's a good thing. But they didn't realize that here comes Islam, and since Islam is considered a minority religion, they use the affirmative action type of ideology to say that they're allowed to give preference to Islam as far as dishing out tax dollars. So you have churches being foreclosed by an IRS that's rogue and targets conservatives and Christians as if they're some kind of enemy of the state. Meanwhile, they're using government tax dollars to build these mega mosques all across the continent.
Right. They're using tax dollars to build mega mosques across the continent. I said right like I knew that. What?
No, that would be bad enough, but at the same time, while they're doing that, the IRS is foreclosing on churches. I mean, we've got one here in Columbus, Indiana, that used to be a church when we first moved in. About a year later, it closes down, and now it's an Islamic center. And I know the
What?
IRS is behind that. Yeah.
Hold on. What now? It's an Islamic censor. What is that? What is an Islamic censor? I'm familiar with a mosque.
Well, an Islamic center is like well, I don't know. I guess you could consider it a Masonic lodge where everybody like-minded people get together and make their schemes. Basically, what it is to establish their domain in a certain area. It's sort of like and people think, well, there was a church there once and now it's an Islamic center, and then someday it'll probably be a Walmart. No, once Islam gets a hold of property, it can't be anything but Islamic, or it's against the Quran. So it's one of
So
those
they'll
things
fight
when
for
when
that.
you, when you see a mosque going up, it's not going to be foreclosed and like the churches around here become a dance hall or something. It will always be Islamic after that.
So they will fight for that. They'll shoot you if you try to take it.
Oh, absolutely. It's the whole thing is about expanding the domain of the Islam. That's their whole goal and purpose. And the reason that they have to do this is because that's what the Quran says is going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then the Quran is pretty much false. So their job is, and their goal is, and just like the shooter that shot these Marines, his posting was about we need to establish global Islamic law. That is the agenda. That is the goal. That is the motivation. That is the radicalization that everybody's talking about. It's Islamic law. It's ideology. It's ideology of being the global government, being the one world religion theocracy government, a socialist government under Sharia law.
Is that what you see happening?
Oh yeah, the United Nations. That's the whole thing about the United Nations New World Order. It was to abolish the constitutions of men and replace it with socialism. United Nations socialism. And the only way to get everybody on board, because the Islamists aren't going to accept a global government that isn't anything but Islamic law. So they adopted Sharia law because Islam is basically a theocracy, a type of government that is also socialism. And that's why you have the left so pro-Islam and so anti-Christian, because Christians, for the most part, are capitalism. You work hard, you make your living, you manifest your own destiny. But Islam is socialism, so that's why you have all these, socialists and people with gays agenda and this, that, and the other, rooting for Islam, not realizing when Sharia law comes in, you gay guys are getting tossed off of buildings. That's what they're doing now.
Right. Yeah. Tell us about that. I heard something about that. They're tossing gay guys off of buildings.
Well, there's already pictures of it.
Who's doing that? Islam.
Yeah, ISIS.
ISIS are just throwing gay guys just off of buildings.
Yep,
Wow, now I'm
off of tall
surprised.
buildings. And the ones that make it, the public down below, they stone them to death and make sure they finish it.
That's insane. I'm surprised that the media reports on that. I mean, they don't want people knowing
Well, see,
that.
they don't report on it. You can get your best news, like right now, you can get your best news by going to Egyptian television and watching their news because they ain't worried about being considered or called racist because they have an opinion of Obama that's the truth. They'll be on TV and they'll be saying he must be on drugs or something. I mean, he was just on TV talking about the greatest threat is global warming. They said, is he drunk? Because they realize only a stupid person would be faced with the threat of this Islamic, takeover of the country, and him talking about the greatest threat is global warming. I mean, so if you really want the news of what's going on, watch some Egyptian news reporting because they've already experienced what we're currently experiencing. They already had a government set up, and it was pretty much a secular government to where, yeah, they had Islamists in there, and they still have their views, this, that, and the other. But at least Christians were allowed to live. It was tolerant. It was most secular. I mean, they weren't killing people because they was drinking a beer or smoking a cigarette. It was more of a secular government, like the people wanted. Okay, and then here comes Obama saying, well, these are going to be the historic first elections in Egypt. So of course you got a 90% population that's Muslim. Okay, and the only reason they're such a large number is because Muslims don't have any other choice but to be Muslim or be killed. So of course they're going to be the fastest growing religion there is. But when you have when you have a election for the first time, of course they're going to vote for the Islamist dictator that comes in, and the first thing he does is he abolishes their constitution. He demonizes the military to where you have riots in the street and the people are against the police, against the military, just exactly like Obama's doing now. And they get this Mohammed Morsi coming in there, and he's like, "Is the Quran is our constitution?" And I got a video showing exactly his campaign speeches, so you get a good idea exactly what he's talking about. Where they're going to abolish the constitution and they're going to use the Quran. So now the Egyptian people realize, okay, here's a first election, and he was duly elected, officially elected, the first
Quote.
historical election in Egypt, and they got an Islamic dictator that's doing away with their constitution and is establishing Sharia law. So
There's
what did
nothing
they do?
funny about that. But it's just insane. It's totally insane. Like, how is
Yeah,
this allowed to happen?
but you saw how they took their government back.
I
The
didn't. I
people that
missed.
were in the military, sided with the people on their constitution, and they put their lot in with the people, and then you had everybody in the streets, and they overthrew Morsi. Okay, well
Nice.
that was Hillary Clinton and Obama's boy there. That was their prime, and that's what they didn't count on happening. They did not count on that happening, or they would have did the same thing in Syria as they did in Egypt, as they did in Libya, they did in Iraq. Replace all these leaders, which they weren't saints. These leaders weren't even good guys, but they were a lot better leaders than having these Islamist ISIS dictators in there that we got in there now. You know,
They're still in there.
well, the only ones hanging in there right now is Assad in Syria. But I mean, they've been working on that for quite a while. But and they would have succeeded in overthrowing him if Mohammed Morsi had stayed in Egypt. They did it in Turkey. They got it all figured. They got it all planned out in there to where they was on a roll. I mean, it almost got pulled off. But thanks to the good people, the strong people of Egypt, that got out in the streets and rejected Islamic law as a type of government. I mean, if you just know the basics of Islamic law, you know that there's no way that can be a legitimate form of government, not that can produce any kind of freedoms or rights or justice.
It's crazy. Yeah, and I
It's
know
abs-
I had no idea about that because, like I said, I don't pay attention to this stuff because the reason I don't pay attention to it is because it's confusing and you're being lied to right off the bat, and then it's like I don't even know where to go to find the real story. You mentioned Egypt news. I just looked it up, and a headline says Egypt to revise anti-terror media law. That sounds interesting. There's an anti-terror media law in Egypt. It sounds like they're trying to change it, but that sounds like a good thing.
well, anything's better than what they had. I mean, it's one of those things now to where they've experienced it firsthand. This whole quote unquote Arab Spring, which was nothing more than a United Nations thing. You got to come to the conclusion, because the facts are facts, that the United Nations is pro-Islam, pro-socialism, anti-capitalism, and anti-Christian, and definitely anti-Constitution. So therefore, everybody took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign or domestic. Take it legitimately real and consider the United Nations just like the Pope, a socialist enemy of our Constitution.
The UN is a socialist enemy of our Constitution.
Absolutely.
I
They think
believe it.
themselves. That's like right now the sanctions on Iran. That's what the whole deal with the Iran thing was to release up all these sanctions, all this money for them. And the only ones that can do that is Congress. Well, we thought now Obama's gone to the UN and the UN's going to vote on it. You're just totally ignoring the Congress as if it doesn't matter because they're showing that UN is supreme to our Constitution, which we should not let that stand.
How do what
Because
do we what
if
do we
that's the
do?
case, we don't need a Congress or Senate. We need to get rid of it and save all that money.
I do want to interject. I was totally wrong about this. They are doing an anti. They're talking about revising an anti-terror media law in Egypt, but the anti-terror law is bad, you guys. It's a law that threatens journalists with jail for reporting anything other than the official line on jihadist attacks. So yeah, apparently that's going on in Egypt. They're not allowed to report on anything except for the official story on these jihad attacks. That's how
Well, that
that's
would
how
be
you
better
control the
than what
media.
we got because right now we're supposed to be thinking that there's a good Islam and there's a bad Islam, and I was explaining that today. I said this moderate Muslim and these radical Muslims and the moderate Muslims are okay, and like I was trying to tell this Muslim, I was saying, look at our religion doesn't threaten you if you decide you want to try Hinduism or Buddhism or something else. We don't threaten to kill you for that. That's your own personal business. I said,
Right.
I just want people to be free. And I understand that most of the Muslims who call themselves Muslims are only doing that because they have no choice. They're afraid not to. And all I'm doing is trying to offer them what it's like to really be free because he was saying, it seems to me like you're just all about nothing but freedom. And I said, yeah, you're right. I am all about freedom because to me, freedom is the evidence of truth because only truth can set man free. Okay, so if you have freedom, then you know it was because of truth, and there's truth there. And that's why everybody's so down with Trump because he seems like the only person that's willing to speak the truth. And people really don't want politicians now. They just don't want to be lied to because it's insulting to them. So anybody just tells them the truth, all of a sudden they're down for it, regardless of what their hair looks like or if they're in entertainment or whatever, you know?
What do you think about Trump?
Well, I don't vote.
It
I
doesn't. It
feel
doesn't matter, right? That goes back
God
to
wanted us to vote, he would have had given us candidates. And I understand that a lot of Christians they're like we should get involved with politics, this, that, and the other. And yeah, it's a good thought, but when you really think about God being in control and what's going to happen is going to happen, sometimes what you pray for because you want it isn't what's going to happen or is the will of God. So you're basically praying to God, bothering Him with your request of something that's not meant to be and is not going to happen. So you're actually praying against the will of God. That's why Christ said, and He taught people how to pray. When you pray, it's our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy will be done. In other words, the whole thing is about God's will being done, whether it means you're free or in bondage. His will is what you pray for. And I doubt if there's very many people out there who when besides not just praying for themselves and what they want, they're healing this, that, and the other, but are praying for things that are contrary to the will of God. Not
mm.
saying, the end of mankind is the will of God. It's just the way it's written and the way it's going to be. And we can't change that with prayer. I mean, if we wanted to change that, legitimately change that, the nation would have to start first by repenting. And first, they would know what they have to repent of. They would think, well, abortion or sodomy, this, that, and the other. You'd have to get to the very basics of what you need to repent for, and that would be your very foundation. Having a national monument that's an erect phallic symbol, having pagan pantheon in your nation's capital, having your founder declared to be a god sitting on the throne of God, showing himself that he is God in the rotunda, which is the Holy of Holies. There's a lot of things that they need to repent for, but it's not going to happen because it was written that they refused to repent. So
So
me
now,
praying, yeah, God, let them change this country back the way it was. Nah, it was never that way. It was started by greed and genocide, and it's done nothing but continue to get into a situation to where you can see the fruit of the tree, knowing that the tree's roots are what it's always been. Because a good tree doesn't produce bad fruit. So if you have all this bad fruit, you might want to just accept the fact that your tree is what was bad from the beginning.
I don't even know, Stephen. I mean, what do we do? What do we do? All this stuff is too much to handle, you know?
No, it's pretty simple. He gave us instructions. It's clear what we're supposed to do. Be separate. Now, I mean, that's the most peaceful, graceful thing you can do in our situation when we're provoked into conflict. and provoked into, being forced to serving these other gods, and saying, well, I guess it's okay if our nation's capital is giving credit to Roman's pagan pantheon for all our technology and our agriculture and all the blessings that God gave us, giving credit to the pagan's pantheon in your nation's capital. I guess I can live with
Oh,
that.
you're saying that they claim that, I mean, because we did get most of our technology from demons, right? That's what I was under the impression of.
Well, if you go to your nation's capital and look at the Apotheosis of Washington, it's on your
Right.
nation's capital rotunda. You look at the ceiling, they have all the pagan gods and goddesses up there, and each one depicts a certain thing, giving tribute to where they got it from. Like you'll see Benjamin Franklin sitting there with a pen and paper, and you got the god Mercury, dictating to him what to write. So you got literature, industry, art, and all these things, all these blessings, agriculture, everything that we got that is good. The nation's capital is giving honor to these pagan gods as the origin of that, which is theft from God, because all praise and honor and glory belongs to God alone. And for Washington to give that praise and glory and honor to the pagan's pantheon, I mean, it kind of gives you an idea of exactly how far off America has always been. So you can pray all you want to. You can fast until you're skin and bones. It is not going to change a thing.
It's not.
Nothing.
It's not. You can't.
Absolutely nothing.
What? Because what I've learned is there's three different ways it could happen. There's God's perfect will. That's what He wants to happen. If He had it His way, if he had it totally His way, it would be that way. And then there's the will of man. There's certain things that we can change, like we can choose whether or not to follow God. We don't have to. That's because He gave us free will. So, He's not in control of that per se. But then there's also
Well,
so far that He won't go. It's like, okay, He won't let these things happen, and this is like against the perfect will of God. But there's somewhere in the middle that this like that I'm a little bit confused about, because I mean, what if we all prayed and like, would God honor that? Like, wow, here's this guy. It's
yeah.
just, wow, he's
God
just
is
super
God is
earnest.
not God is not bound by time or rules or regulations of man or any of that. If everybody was sincere and everybody knew the truth and everybody repented and we did turn from our wicked ways, He said He would heal our land. So He's saying that He would do that if we did that. But it also says, and they refused to repent. So it shows that we don't. But He would. He would change everything if we would only do that, but we won't.
How do
And
we
that's
do
like
that?
why He says, I desire that no one perish. So
Right.
God's will, exactly like what you were saying. God's will is that none should perish. However, disobedience to the law results in death. God didn't create sin. Man's rebellion to the law is what brought forth sin, because God didn't give law to be mean or restrictive. He gave law to give life and to ensure and preserve life. Therefore, when man disobeys that law, he's rejecting life and embracing death. That's why it says the wages of sin is death,
Right.
because it's man's rebellion to the life that causes the death and the sin. So it's not like sin is a creation of God. So He's like, here's a human being, and I'm going to give him a little sin and a little bit of good and let him fight it out, this, that, and the other. No, He created man with a free will, and His desire was that none perish. And He warned man not to disobey the laws, the tree of life, because then if you disobey the tree of life, you'll be partakers of the tree of death.
Mm. It's hard though, because you know how human nature is. You tell someone not to, don't, whatever you do, don't push this button. What's the first thing the person's gonna do? That's the only. I'm not saying I'm at beef with God about that. It's kind of weird that He would let us, because you just know that we're gonna get. We know we're not gonna choose the right thing. I don't know.
Because the nature of man is rebellious from the beginning.
How
That's
is
part of
that?
the
Why
nature
is
of
that?
man.
Why, if He created us to be perfect and stuff, why did we even have the? It's just weird. It just makes me sad that He would allow us to do something that is that wrong, or that hurts Him that bad.
Well, it's all the difference if you're God and you want a creation that is programmed to
Right.
worship you, or one that has a free will and chooses to. Okay, I mean it's one of those things. He goes, in one hand I have life, and in one hand I have death. Choose life. So
Right.
it's like He gives you an offering. Now, yeah, and I mean the rebellious spirit of man, that's just part of nature. I mean it's part of Pan. It's part of being a creation of earth, and that's why you must be born again.
Uh.
Because instead of being born of flesh and being born of the earth and those carnal, the fallen man, you're born of spirit, to where it's not that you're going to be perfect. It's just that you're going to be forgiven. And He knew your sins from the time you was born to the time you died before He ever hung on a cross. So that's an important thing to remember.
Yeah, yeah. Like you said, you're wary of anything that just makes a person straight up question their salvation. Like, oh, are you really
Right.
saved?
Right.
That
Because
whole that'll take you. Yeah, I've been lost on that many times, and I'm still, I still get sucked into that. Like, oh, like right now, I feel like I'm just a bad guy, just all around. Just man, that guy John Rapp, he's just evil dude that you don't even want to be around. That may or may not be true, but I feel that way. So I don't know. It's good to have Christian brothers like you to talk to and stuff like that. But and then, Stephen, where do you go to church, man, or do you go to church? Because I don't.
I I don't go to church. Not that I'm against the scripture. It says, "Forsake not the assembling of yourselves together,"
Yeah.
to strengthen and encourage fellow believers. But with the technology I got now, because see, my dad always wanted me to own a church or be a pastor of a church, because he felt like that was success because that's what he always desired to do is to be a pastor of a church and have a big congregation.
Mm.
I said, Dad, with the internet and
Mm.
with Facebook and YouTube, I said, I've got over 2 million people that I've already talked to, and there's no church that could contain that number. So
That's a
what
good
you and I
point.
have going on right now, to me, is the fellowship that he was talking about when there's two or three gathered together in my name, there will I be also. So the spiritual truth will be there if you got one or two people that come together for the sole purpose of edifying the truth. And
Right.
that's what I feel. This is my church, so I go to church on a daily basis. When you think of it that way, I don't go to the ritual traditions of men because, well, would I go to church on Saturday or would I go to church on Sunday? Would I consider the Sabbath the Sabbath that Christ considered the Sabbath, or would I consider the Sabbath that the Pope considers the Sabbath?
Well,
You know what
first
I'm
of all,
saying?
I
So,
think the answer is pretty clear on that one. I think you would reject the Pope and say what Christ said. What did Christ say for once and for all?
well,
It's Saturday.
Saturday was always a Sabbath for him. It's like the people who are Jewish that reject a Jewish Messiah. It's like the first question that comes to my mind is why would you?
Yeah,
Why would you reject one of your own
maybe that's
if it was
why.
not told that you would do that from the beginning?
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, but yeah, literally though, why? What was the reason? Not just we know that. Yeah, that's just so crazy. But yeah, it was prophesied that they would reject him, and they did. Well, why? I guess it's just that
Well,
spirit, man. Like a spirit of
because it made
Antichrist
it,
that
it
exists in
made
the
him
world.
special. It made him special compared to them, like the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the high priest. Here you had a person declaring himself to be the Son of God. To them, that was the ultimate blasphemy because they're like, no, we are all children of Abraham,
Mm.
as if we are all equal. That there is. Well, and see, the thing was,
They didn't want a Messiah.
they was looking for no, they were looking for Messiah at the time, but they was looking for the lion Messiah. They was looking for the Messiah that was going to use force, overthrow the Roman Empire, and establish his eternal kingdom and free them. That was what they was wanting, but that's not the way it happens because you got to be a servant before you're a master. You have to be the lamb before you're the lion. So they wanted a lion Messiah and they got the lamb Messiah and they rejected him. And now the world wants a lamb Messiah that's one of peace and
Hmm.
love and kumbaya,
Hmm.
and they're going to get the lion Messiah.
Yeah. No, no. What is that? What is the lion Messiah? How does that play out? What's that going to look like?
Well, it's going to be one who was just and unjustly murdered as an innocent man, falsely accused, whose rightful domain is this earth as his footstool, whose children have been slaughtered in genocide. And he's pretty much going to put a smackdown on the nations. It's going to be God's wrath. It's going to be that conquering Messiah that the nations, all the nations, are going to realize what is the true religion and what is best for mankind and what is best for society and what truly does give man his freedoms and his rights and his liberty. And they will weep. The Jews who rejected him will weep when they behold the one who was crucified and pierced, when they see his holes in his wrist and his spear scar in his side. It was just sort of like doubting Thomas.
So that's what he's going to come down and he's going to be all mangled like that.
He's going to be what?
Mangled, like with the spear in his side and the holes in his arms. That's what he's going to show up like.
No, that it's like battle scars. I mean, if you was ever in a contest and you had a scar, you say, "See that one? That's when I fought the lion." I mean, his scars are testimony to our gifts. It's like by his stripes we are healed. he will still have the scars, just as I believe the saints who are beheaded for Christ will have the scars of their beheading. It's like when Christ went to doubting Thomas, when after he was crucified and Christ come walking through the wall instead of using the door. And the disciples were sorely afraid, and they said, "It is a spirit." And he said, "I'm not a spirit." He goes, "Feel of me. I have flesh and bone." And doubting Thomas was saying, "I'm not going to believe it until I actually can feel your flesh and bone." And he showed Thomas the nail prints. Okay, and people say in his hands, but actually it was right in his wrist. And he says, "Here." And Thomas actually stuck his finger into his nail prints, and that's when
Ugh.
he believed. So yeah. I mean, you'll have the evidence necessary to make you a believer if you have no faith.
And then when he shows back up again, are people going? Is it too late at that point, or when you do see him, is there still that one last time you say, "Wow, I'm totally wrong. I accept that you're right." Is there?
Well, I think when that time comes, the world is going to already have learned its lesson as far as the natural disasters and the wrath that's going to come. The ones who are still remaining on earth will either be the ones that are destroyed with the brightness of his coming, or the ones who are willing at that time to accept him. So it's not going to be one of those things he's going to come here and have to convince anybody of anything. When he
Hmm.
comes here, the planet will already be convinced one way or the other. The wicked will be the ones who are under the mountains crying out for the mountains to fall on them and hide them. So everybody will know the truth at that moment. It'll just be too late for some, and it'll be a time of rejoicing for others.
Now we were talking, I think, about chimeras last time, right? Is that mixing of one animal with another animal breed?
We talked about what?
Did we? Well, whether or not we did, I don't know. But a chimera isn't that an animal that's one like two different breeds mixed together? And what I'm getting at is like in the times of Noah, and back then they had all these weird hybrid breeding things going on. Are you familiar with any of that?
No, like the Minotaur or something?
Yeah, weird things like that. I've been listening to this guy Rob Skiba, and he's talking about he talks about like the Nephilim and the things that they were doing back around the time of the flood. Apparently, they were breeding different animals together, and you see Egyptian hieroglyphics of a giant person walking like a actual literal giant walking a lion man, behind an elephant, like things like that. He talks about stuff like that.
Like a
So
man with a man with a crocodile's head or the lion face
yes,
people.
the lion faced people. Yeah, yep, yeah. What do you know about that stuff? It's weird.
Well, I mean, they consider them gods and goddesses and that sort of thing. I'm not really that up on the Egyptians' beliefs about, you know,
Well,
that kind of thing.
they're doing it again. Is this guy Rob Skiba's point, and hopefully I can get him on the show and you can talk to him. But uh, they're doing it again, and it's like the trippiest thing I ever heard was that in the Bible it says that we have pretty much this we're getting to be into the times of Noah. So the idea that some people have is they used to have better technology than we do now. They were.
Well, the one thing I have heard about that is the actual taking spider silk and genetically modifying it with goat's milk, so you would have a substance that they can use for defense as far as this super hard alloy. So yeah, I'm sure they're trying to genetically modify things, but you got to remember the biggest sin that was the cause of the flood back then was not the combining of animals, but actually the sons of heaven having intercourse with the daughters of earth.
Yeah, and that's what created the Nephilim, right?
Well, that's what they say created the Nephilim and the giants, this, that, and the other, but it's more of I don't know, it's more of a combining of two realms. It's sort of like George Washington's National Monument, his physical obelisk, okay, penetrating the Queen of Heaven. The same thing that destroyed the earth back then of the heavenly bodies having intercourse with the occupants of earth. Now it's to the point where you have the occupants of earth having intercourse with the heavenly bodies. It's the same thing, just in reverse order.
It's crazy, man.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean,
It's all crazy. It's like all Twilight Zone stuff. It's unbelievable, but it's real.
I believe every single bit of it, and it's just what I mean by crazy is my mind can't wrap around too much of it at once. It's like it can only take in so much of that stuff. I don't mean crazy as in I don't believe it or wow, I don't believe it at all. I do believe it, and that's why I think it's so crazy.
It's like waking up in the Matrix for real, to where it's sort of like hard to grasp, hard to contain, but as long as you have the basic idea that it is a Matrix, then it's easier to deal with some of the things.
Yeah, but then you want to go out and be Neo, you know? Like, did you probably hear me say it a lot? What do we do, Stephen? What should we do? What are we going to do? What do I do? I want to
And
do something about this. There's,
is that a bad thing to want to be Neo?
well, I don't know. Probably. It
I
sounds like some type of
wouldn't think so.
psychosis. It sounds
I
like you're
wouldn't
losing
think
your
so.
mind.
I think if he was going to be anybody in the Matrix, you'd want to be the Neo. And the beautiful thing is we're giving that opportunity
Now,
because
now,
you
how do we
can't
be Neo? What can we do here? 'Cause
to know the truth.
just
And that
speak the
was the
truth.
whole
I've
point.
seen it work, Stephen. I've seen it work, and that's why I get mad at myself for getting caught up in other stuff. And I'm sure everybody, but you go just say the word Jesus out loud. Stuff changes, especially if you're in like a moment of like stress or something. And it's just like it's crazy. It's undeniable. If you're out there and you're not a believer, and you're actually still listening to this. Just try it. Just try it out. You'll see. It's weird,
That's
but
the
there's
fact.
what else can we do? Is what I'm saying. Like the whole idea of like speak life. I mean, you can actually literally just sit there and speak stuff into existence if it's of the will of God,
Absolutely.
and that's crazy.
Absolutely.
That's a good crazy.
Oh, it is a good crazy, and it's a promise, and it's a gift, and it's one of the benefits of believing the truth. I mean, he gives us the opportunity, like none other, to be able to do these things. And all the miracles that he did, that people would say, walked on water, raised the dead, able to resurrect. These are. He said, greater things than these shall you do. And it's just a matter of believing and being thankful for it and doing it. I mean, what should we do? We should speak truth, because if truth sets man free and we're silent and we're guilty of apathy, evil prevails when good men does nothing.
Right.
And that's why Muhammad used to brag, how many cities have we invaded and utterly destroyed and heard yet not a whisper out of them? And that's how he was able to do it. You've got to be able to speak out. Islam is afraid. Islam is all about fear. That's why they use fear, is because fear is what motivated them to be Islamists in the first place. Because it's effective to them, so it thinks it works on you. But if you show no fear, they have no power. To the
Mm-hmm.
contrary, we're afraid of somebody who has no fear.
Yeah,
And
there's
the
no
only way
reason for him to be.
yeah, the only way you show and prove that you have no fear is speaking out when you should be afraid to.
Okay. And I've noticed that when you do that, people that well, most pretty much everybody, they kind of at least around here in Indiana or whatever, they understand what you're saying. Like if something's just going crazy out there in real life, and everybody's oh no, this person, and it's a big fight or something. If you just interject and speak some truth, like hey, wait a minute, let's all take a step. People seem to listen to it. It's just that one person, like you said, if someone doesn't say anything about it, who knows how bad it could get. But just that one dude or lady that stands up is like, hey, you know what? I don't know if we ought to be cutting this guy's head off or not.
Because I've always said that too. Even evil, even the demons recognize truth.
Right. They don't like it,
You know?
right?
Well, no, they don't like it, but they have to acknowledge it. They know that it's just like when Christ went toward the man who was possessed. It was like, send us somewhere else. Don't destroy us. Let us go somewhere else into some other person.
Yeah.
I mean, they recognized there's power in that they can't fight. Game's over, and all they do at that point is just ask for some kind of mercy.
And it's weird that he gave it to him. But I heard someone explain it because what he did was he said, "Yeah, go ahead and go into those pigs over there." And so the evil spirits went into pigs and they jumped over the cliff. I heard someone say the other day, tell me if I've already told you this, but the reason that Jesus did that was because there were Jews there who were selling the pigs, and Jews weren't supposed to be eating pigs, but they were making money, selling pigs, and so that's why Jesus let the demons, do that because
No, here's the real reason, John.
okay,
Here's you know what the real reason is?
what?
Pigs can't swim.
Mm. So they died anyway. Well, but they
Well,
went off to yeah.
he
That's what
did.
I didn't get. They go and kill. They're like, hey, don't kill us. Don't send us somewhere else. And like, okay, go into there. Then what do? They go and drown. Like what? I just don't get
Well,
it.
they
Just,
can't really blame anybody but Pan for that, because Pan was considered the scatterer of the livestock because the shepherds would be in a field and all the livestock would be nice and chilled and just mellow. And all of a sudden they would all scatter like they was afraid of something. They always attributed that Pan playing his flute
This little panpipe.
in the invisible realm would cause a panic. And that's where you get the word panic from. It comes from Pan playing
Wow.
his flute, causing the animals to be distressed and to panic and to run like they're being chased by a wolf. And so they attributed that phenomenon to Pan. So the pigs could blame Pan for that because they can't blame God for that because they didn't ask him, to let them live forever. They just asked, send us somewhere else. So he did.
Do you think he would have if they said, let us come to your side,
Well, he would say there's only one way you can have eternal life, and that's accepting the truth.
Or the
I mean, you can't reject the truth and think that you're going to be given the same life that he gives to those who accept the truth because it's the life itself.
but
They're actually
humans
rejecting life.
humans are allowed more of a longer leash, I guess. Like, I mean, as long as we're breathing, we can ask for forgiveness, right?
Well, as long as you know the truth and you've accepted Christ and you've been born again, okay, it's not a matter of every time I sin, I have to repent because I sin in thought, word, or deed every day. And if I don't with my thought, word, or deed, then there's always something that I should be doing that is good that
Mm.
I fail to do, and that is also sin. So basically, once you have an understanding that you are not going to live one day without sin, and that's why, when the disciple says, I die daily, I'm resurrected daily, but I die daily. In other words, every day you're going to die, every day you're going to sin. And I'm not saying go out and intentionally sin and be as wicked as you want to be because God will not be mocked, nor will his grace. But just know and comfort that even if there's a sin that you didn't realize was actually a sin, it's not going to be held against you. When he went to the cross, he paid for all of that. And as long as your heart is right and you know the truth and you're appreciative of his grace and knowing that no one can pluck you out of the hand of God, that you're forgiven, that's the comfort and joy. That's part of the gift.
So should you ask for forgiveness? Because I was under the impression that we were supposed to.
You should. You should every day. I mean, he already knows things before you tell him. Okay, let's keep it really real. He knows your needs before you even ask. Okay,
Right.
it's one of those things to where if he knows in your heart that you're you're sorry for any of your sin and that someday you're hoping for that glorified body and this corruptible flesh will put on incorruptible immortality, he's willing to work with you on that. Is what I'm saying. Yeah,
Right.
you should always be humbled and you should always be sorry of any kind of shortcomings you have, but you should also be mature enough spiritually to understand you're not going to be Christ. You're not even going to be Christ-like.
Wow.
It's an impossibility. All you got to do is realize that, hey, I am a child of the King because I was adopted. He had mercy upon me, and I've got my shortcomings, but just like your kids, you're still going to love them.
So what are you doing now that things are getting weird? Are you changing your behavior at all? You buying more food, or you ramping up the
Well, I think everybody should have a sense of priority and be able to see what's going on around them and at least be prepared, if nothing else, so they're not a burden to others who do plan ahead and prepared.
Yeah.
It's just like, telling the virgins to have oil for their lamps, to be prepared for when the bridegroom comes back, they will have a light into their feet. In other words, it's saying prepare, and I'm saying prepare. So I I like to consider myself prepared.
What do you have? You don't have to say everything, I guess, but what level? I mean, are we talking about underground bunkers with years worth of food, or?
No, no, no. I'm just like the people that came before me. I plan on being mobile. I plan on being able to go different places. I plan on being able to, be out in the hills. If it says to flee to the hills, then I'm kind of under the same impression that it's the cities that you want to avoid
Now,
because
why is
not
it?
many people can live off the land or
Is
out.
it is the city going to be destroyed because it is the manifestation of the Antichrist beast system, or is that just?
Well, one of the reasons, I mean, just looking at from a natural perspective as far as other nations getting weapons of mass destructions and going to war against each other, they always target the industrialized cities because that's where the manufacturing is. That's what's their strength, and that's what's their core of their military industry is, places, automotive places, any place that has manufacturing abilities. Those are the places that are always targeted, and those are usually always in the cities. And in the cities, when there's no food and there's no electricity, and you see how they act in the streets now when they have all the benefits, gimmies that they can possibly handle. So imagine what it's like when there's no food to be found, and
Yeah.
there's homes that they want to salvage, survival gear, this, that, and the other. So I don't plan on staying stationary. And so if I'm not going to be stationary, I want the basics that I need to survive. I mean, you know, it's a good thing to get out and do some camping and some canoeing and learn how to make cordage and how to make a fire. And those things are good things to have, even if nothing was going to happen.
Hmm.
But I mean, you should not be fearful and worried because there's people in the Bible who was in the wilderness and they were fed by ravens bringing them food. So trust in God and fear not. But He gave you a brain for a specific purpose, and you'd be ashamed not to use it.
Okay. Well, I'm not prepared at all.
Well, some of us don't have to be very prepared. Because I have a feeling it'll get to the point to where it'll be a tribal thing once again, where people will come together and
Yeah.
takes care of the tribe, and the tribe takes care of the tribe, and we really don't have that much to worry about.
I just don't know what I'm going to bring to the tribe when everything goes off or whatever, because I got nothing. I can get you on Google. I can get your business on Google's front page, but the internet doesn't exist. What am I going to do, Steven? I'm going to be a burden.
The only thing you need to bring to a tribe is loyalty.
Oh,
Other
I
than
can
that,
do
everything
that.
else is provided. Everybody has their role and purpose. I mean, life has continued down here long before there was Walmarts and technology, and so it will continue.
I like that. I think that's a good note to end on. What do you think, Steven?
I think it's a good note to end on.
All right, I feel better about that. Well, all right, man. Oh yeah, we didn't talk about the thing that God wanted us to talk about.
Well, I doubt that could ever even be a possibility because it seems like, and that's why it says, don't worry about what you're going to say when you're delivered up to councils. He'll give you what you need to say, and then that's the whole purpose, and that's my prayer. If you want my prayer is the same prayer that He would want me to pray, and that is His will be done,
Right.
on earth as it is in heaven.
Now, do you
That
think it
all
was his will that we didn't talk about that, or do you think it was the trick of the devil that's made us forget to talk about it?
Oh, I don't go down those rabbit holes. The thing about faith is you have to have confidence in His word, and if His word tells you to do a certain thing, you can't go wrong. And so it would matter not what we talk about tonight. I'd have absolutely nothing but confidence that that was what He would want spoken.
Well, just real quick, you could probably answer it too. But the guy said Jesus maybe didn't even exist, and if he did, he wasn't the one that was. He wasn't he didn't fulfill the prophecies. Is that a can of worms that we should save for next time, or is that something you could kind of just
Oh,
dip it?
oh yeah, we can always open up that can of worms. I mean, because it's one of those things. There's people out there whose sole purpose is not to set people free and give them truth and eternal life. Their purpose is to sell books. So you're going to have a lot of people saying a lot of things that are contrary to even logic. You find another person on earth that even came close to fulfilling all the scriptures of the Old Testament as far as the coming Messiah. Try to find one. There isn't one. And if you think that there's going to be one coming in the future that could do more than he already did, I mean, look at civilization itself. I mean, from our calendar of after death or before Christ, AD and BC. I mean, no one person has done more to actually do what he did.
Okay.
Okay, so as far as waiting for somebody to come along and do more than Christ did as far as fulfilling things, and Christ was very astutely aware of needing to fulfill these things because there
Uh,
was times he would tell his disciples, we must get in the boat and travel to this city and do this thing so that scriptures may be fulfilled. So he understood his duty was to fulfill those scriptures. So, number one, you had an individual who was recorded as identifying what his purpose was to fulfill the scriptures of the old as far as what the Messiah would do.
okay. Well, that's good enough for now. But I would like to talk about that next week if we can remember, because a lot of people just from the get go they say I don't even believe Jesus existed, and they'll go like that Zeitgeist movie. It totally drives into people's heads that Jesus didn't exist, and even if he did, he was he had the same characteristics as 50 or 60 other stories. So anyway, I
Yeah,
would like to at
but
least
those same people are probably the ones that teach their kids that there is such a thing as Santa Claus. So you
yeah.
got to remember human nature and choices. And if they choose to live a certain way, of course, they're going to try to find everything possible to justify why they don't believe, and
Yeah.
trying to convince them to believe something that is there, that is historic record. I mean, you can doubt all you want to. Doubters are a dime a dozen. It's the ones who have to have faith and to believe the things that they can't see, because that's what God said. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. You have to have faith in order to please God. So, yeah, He could really easily, prove things, and that's why He called you're a generation of vipers, because you're always demanding some kind of a sign to prove what I'm saying instead of just believing and using faith, because it's faith that pleases God. So if He proved Himself to where it was beyond a scientific doubt of who He was, then mankind wouldn't have any faith at all.
Yeah.
That's why He
That's
says, "When I
okay.
return, will I even find any faith on the earth?"
Wow. So faith for some reason is an ingredient, it just is. And if Jesus came, because people are always like, oh, well, why didn't he just come down and say, do, it's me, now you can believe. Because for some reason faith is some important ingredient in this whole matrix. Is that right?
It is our part of a relationship, and a relationship always takes two people. And faith is a lot like giving God a hug, in my opinion.
Okay. Okay, well, yeah, I could keep going with questions after question, and I'm sure you could keep answering, but I will let you go, Stephen. Thank you very much, and then next week we'll talk about whatever God wants us to, I guess. But I would like to attack that whole let's track down some facts. What do you say to somebody when they say, hey, your religion sucks because the guy, Jesus, didn't even exist? Like, I don't know what to say to him.
Well, I'd like to, because there's people bash it all the time and say, when you compare it to just other religions alone, say compare it to Islam, there is no comparison. One is about love and forgiveness, and the other one's about hate and violence and terror. I
Right.
mean, look at the benefits. Christianity, you get freedom. Islam, you don't. And that's why I said about all these other religions. I told my son this one time. I said, I said, research all these other religions. I said, do what I did, because I was a skeptic, and I was raised, in church, and all I wanted to do was rebel and never have anything to do with it again, because that's a typical rebellion of a young kid that always has to go to church on his days off,
Right.
or rebel against it. I said, but compare. I said, don't be afraid. Compare all the religions. I said, I've done that, and I have not found anything even closely comparable to the admiration I have for this faith of mine.
Yeah, and I probably sound like some idiot that's like, well, why do I even believe in Christianity? I've seen it, dude. I've been there and I've seen it happen. I've had a
You've
person.
seen people change. You've seen people you would think have absolutely no hope whatsoever, and you can tell a difference. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a difference.
the
And they're,
per
they're not the same people, dude. I've seen it firsthand, too.
the
It's
person
that
is me.
evidence everybody's asking for. Yeah, me.
Yeah, me, and then everyone else. Like if I'm in tune with God, everything is working fine. And if I'm not, everything's going wrong. I mean, if anybody else can argue till the cows come home, but for me, that is why I have that made the decision to follow Jesus, because I've seen it. I've seen it work, and you just feel it. It's a feeling that you can't escape. So I don't know. I mean, that's what I would tell somebody. But yeah, it makes me feel stupid that I can't argue facts and say, oh well, Josephus, wrote about him and this and that. I don't know. It doesn't even
You'll
matter to
find
me.
that there's nothing more powerful than the truth, and you'll find that there is nothing more beneficial to you and your sanity and your peace of mind than testifying. Because you don't have to worry about what will be said, because it could be one of the most basic, most simple of things. But as long as it's true, it's powerful. And it doesn't matter if you're a historian or a theologian. It's a matter of being able to have the truth within you, having the word within you, having Christ within you, that you're a vessel, but the spirit within comes from above. That's all you need.
Yeah, and that now that I can understand.
Well, I'm glad, because I've been accused a lot of times of talking where no one can understand, and that is a frustrating thing. But
It
like I
is.
said, like I said back in the days, I mean, back in '87, I was talking about this Islamic threat, and my parents never even heard of Islam. Most people never even heard of Islam, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" And nobody could even comprehend it. And that's why, at this time and point in juncture, you would think that I would be whacked out like people who find out the truth of things. But I've never been more at peace just knowing that my faith has not been in vain, that the word is true and the word is sure and it is going to happen and it is happening.
Yeah. Well, all right, Stephen, I'm bad at hanging up on phone calls, I guess, but I'll let you go.
All right. We'll see you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. And I just sent you a link to the episode we did last week. I finally got it online. I guess I forgot to do it, so I'm sorry. But yeah, it's online now, and then I'll get this one on soon as well, and we'll keep doing it, man, because I think we're doing a good thing here.
Oh, I know we are.
Okay.
All right. Take her easy.
God bless, Stephen. Have a good.
God bless you too, John. See ya.